Hey, everybody. Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday.
Rabbi?
Happy Wednesday. Now we've got a lot of people out of town tonight.
Yes, we are in Janice Joplin, Missouri.
Sounds like a nice place.
No, it's not.
Oh,
Wait a second. Did you get there today?
Yeah, we were in Amarillo last night.
So that's a pretty long drive, right?
Not as long as the first drive from Winslow to Amarillo. That was a really long drive.
Really?
Yeah, that took us probably about 10 hours, 10 and a half hours.
Texas is a pretty big state, isn't it?
Well, we're through the panhandle, so we go, quick.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you're enjoying. I love Texas.
Yeah, no, we just drove through. We're actually on our way to Southern Illinois to see the grandkids. Oh, the kids too.
Good. Well, I guess kids count.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
So,
It's good to see you.
we're
Good
glad
to
you
see you
made
too,
it.
Joyce.
Glad you made it on. And so we got Missouri. Hopefully we will have Texas on tonight.
It's a little early, yeah.
And we also have
I think they're planning on it.
could have somebody from up north, Northern California on, maybe, perhaps. Diane could be here tonight, and who knows? We could wind up having more people online than on. Anyways, from far away, from out of state, I was going to say.
And I should let you know the group went well last night, the support group. I was
awesome.
Very pleased.
That's really cool. And I ended up going to the Dodger game last night, which was not fun. But I will tell you what was very interesting about it. I don't know if you know this, Mike. I know you were probably watching at least part of it.
No, you know what? I couldn't because I was in Texas and it was blacked out.
Oh, because of Houston. That's right.
Yeah,
Houston's.
we were listening to it. No.
Well, listen. Tonight should be a better game, anyways. Not that.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign off and go watch that game
because it's going on right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch
it. But yes, last night was not a good night. But it was the largest sporting event since COVID started.
Real, I bet it was pretty cool though. Be there.
It was pretty cool. There was a lot of crowd interaction. And the crowd, because we were playing Houston, obviously people were very upset. They were very motivated to win. Unfortunately, they didn't win. But yeah, it was weird. It was definitely.
Were you in my seats?
Yes, and they were very good seats. But unfortunately, we did not like what we saw that night.
No.
They did not score a run, the Dodgers. So that was.
You know what kills me is they can beat the poor teams, but they can't they have problems with the better teams.
Yeah, well, that's not a good sign. And
no,
they also don't have good success when they're playing close games. They win games by 15 runs, but they can't win a game. They've won one game in extra innings this year. They've won 1 out of 12. And they've won a very meager amount of one run games as well. So not a good sign. Anyways, enough of the sporting news, but I will tell you, they're doing everything they can, I guess, as far as bringing people in. Sports has changed a lot, folks. Sports is now pretty much trying to assemble a dream team, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It worked for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year in football, and it did not work for.
Did you read today? Rabbi, that Dodgers signed Cole Hamels?
I heard that it was happening. I didn't know that it actually happened.
Yeah.
But
really cheap, really like just for $1 million for the rest of the year.
Well, he doesn't play baseball. He wasn't actually playing anywhere. So
no.
It was a little bit of for fun, I would say. Maybe that's not the right word, but they're doing their best. So we're bringing people on again. We have the Schulmans coming in from Texas. We have the Schwartzes tonight from Missouri.
Janice Joplin, Missouri.
Missouri.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I want to say that I checked my notes.
Yes.
And we have been with you for exactly 1 year now. July 29th of last year is when we started with you.
Wow.
So we are very pleased to be part of the group. Thank you for having us.
We're very lucky to have you. And I want to tell you something. You guys have been, even though you're far away, you're definitely part of our family, our community. And I want to thank you guys too for supporting us financially, for taking care of our congregation and making it a part of the things that you care about. We are,
and it wouldn't be the same without you guys, Cheryl.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Thank you a lot.
For sure.
Love you guys.
So they are some special people, and again, we've been lucky to have out of this problem of, again, not being able to be together in person, that there have been some definite benefits. But that being said, we do want to do things in person, and we're very lucky, for example, as we've said many times, to have Joyce running this grief and support group, which has given a lot of support to people so far. They are really, really very, very happy to be connected and to have this opportunity. They're so grateful. That's the word that I hear the most, is just gratitude.
Feedback.
Gratitude, yes, and gratitude for you doing it, for our synagogue hosting it, and again, we've been talking about it. Joyce and I have been talking about it for about a year, I think, maybe even longer.
Wow.
And it has come about not a moment too soon, I would say. And I kind of wish we would have been able, but again, I don't know, we would have been able to do it in person before May or June anyways. I mean, that was really the biggest thing, was holding it up,
Right.
just making sure we could get people into the building. So wow, I'm again very grateful to Joyce for doing this, and I just wish I could be there a little bit myself, because I know I would get a lot out of it myself being there, and I'm hoping maybe next month in September to be able to do that. So what's very interesting, folks, is that 1 month from, well, technically this weekend, the high holidays start. So on the calendar, this is always a busy time. It's ridiculously busy for me now because we're last year it was very busy because we did something different, and we had services online. This year that part will be easier. The online part is easier because it's all set up and we know what we're doing a little bit more. The problem is we're doing that on top of doing services in person. So it is going to be another, I don't want to use the word stressful, because it really wasn't stressful. It was just very, very busy and very tiring. Honestly, I mean, I know what stress is. It wasn't stress so much last year as it was just very time consuming, and really, it was the kind of learning curve kind of stuff that you have to deal with, which again, we're very lucky because, we have the JLTV crew, and we have a lot of people who are professionals already dialed in and already ready to go. I mean, I can't tell you how much that took off of it, but still, we did something we've never done before. And
it's complex. It's not simple.
No, there's a lot of moving parts. We had some new software that we had to engage with. We had new people we had to engage with. And again, whenever you do something for the first time, there is a learning curve. And so I can only tell you that that it will get easier, but I think, I'm pretty sure that this online aspect to services will be with every synagogue for a long time. And I think if services are not being able to be held in person in a lot of synagogues, which it looks like as of today, it looks like that's the case. A lot of the synagogues that I'm talking to in the city are dialing back on services. If they have services, they're going to not have a lot of people there. Maybe a very limited amount of people, and they're trying to figure out how to decide. They maybe just have the board. They might just have a board those kind of decisions that they're making right now. They're going to make them probably over the next week or so. And I'm not 100% sure, but it sounds like the Kever Avot services, the memorial services that the cemeteries do, are not going to be probably open to the public. I can't say that definitively, but it looks like that's the case.
Well, Mount Sinai usually does it outside. I'm surprised.
Mount Sinai does outside, and Eden does it outside too.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
But I think that they're concerned with not being able to limit the size of the crowd, which I don't know. My guess is that a lot of people are not going to come because a lot of the synagogues that are doing in-person services are not getting a lot of people. We're now online. We're now on Facebook, by the way, and we're going to start in just a second. But I will tell you that I think a lot of synagogues are going to make that decision this week because it's literally a month away. On this, however you want to look at it, Rosh Hashanah starts September 6th, the night of Labor Day. So that Monday night is the first night of Rosh Hashanah, and so that means it's Rosh Chodesh Elul this weekend. Rosh Chodesh Elul is supposed to be a time of us reflecting and getting back to our values, our principles, trying to clear our minds and trying to really work on our what we call the cheshbon hanefesh, the personal inventory, to make sure we're taking stock of where we need to improve. And this is what we're supposed to be doing at this time of year. And obviously being engaged in Torah study gives us an automatic advantage, not because it makes us better people necessarily just by doing it, but it helps us crystallize our values, and it helps us engage in spiritual work, which again, this is already, again, putting us, because we're doing this tonight and we're doing this over the next few weeks, and we are planning, I have no days ahead that we're not planning on having classes on Wednesday night. It really does give us a chance to ground ourselves and to have at least one night a week during the month of Elul where we're going to be engaging in spirituality. I can only tell you something, Mike. You heard my phone ringing 4 times just now. That was my daughter, Dina, telling me that I'm never allowed to go to a Dodger game again. That's what she said. So that was her calling me and literally just texting me the words, "Dad, you're never allowed to go to a Dodger game again." And she said that, of course, because the Dodgers are up 4-1 in the first inning. I told her they were going to win tonight. But
that's right. They started early tonight, didn't they? I forgot about that. I've had a very bad record this year of attendance. I've gone like 5 or 6 times, and I think they've won once. I don't know. The game we went to, they won.
I didn't go. You went. My daughter's going again to the Angels. She's going to see the Angels this weekend. She's going to both games. So I'm not going to tell you how to wager. This is not a sports betting show, but I will tell you, my daughter Dina is luckier I don't know if she's luckier than the Schwartzes. The Schwartzes saw a 22-1 baseball game. That never happens, but that's a football. That's not even a football score. 22-1 is that's a cricket score or something. I don't know, but she's very lucky generally. I will say that. Anyway,
well, she's lucky to have you as a father.
Thank you. Very, very sweet. And she's a huge Dodger fan, by the way. I will tell you that as much as I'm a fan, I think she watches more games than I do. Anyways, that being said, and she gets to do it, by the way, in San Diego, where people are actually giving her a hard time now because they're not so bad. Anyway, so we got a lot of Torah to look at because we are catching up. We're reading at Kev. We're starting kind of behind because last week we were supposed to be reading at Kev and we were a week behind, so we were kind of catching up. So we're going to catch up a little bit more today. We're definitely going to get into Re'eh, which is this week's Torah portion, and as I said several times over the years, it's a special portion for me because it's my bar mitzvah portion, and as I've mentioned also, it's the 40th anniversary of my
reading this portion, meaning
You're going to chant it, right?
I will, if you want. I'll chant the beginning of it when we get to it. But I will tell you that reading Re'eh, and I, by the way, what I remember more from Re'eh is that Re'eh is a portion where we oftentimes read a special Haftarah, because Re'eh is usually read that weekend before the Rosh Chodesh Elul. And so oftentimes we read the special Haftarah is called the Haftarah Machar Chodesh, when the Rosh Chodesh is the day after. So that is it's a special Haftarah that's read whenever you are going to have a Rosh Chodesh that weekend. And it's from the book of Samuel, and it happens to be this week is one of those weeks that we read Machar Chodesh. So that I remember. Actually, I remember my Haftarah a little bit better than my Torah portion, because I don't read Haftarot like today. I know, like nowadays, I don't read Haftarot because the bar or bat mitzvah reads a Haftarah, and I'll read Torah a lot. I'll chant Torah all the time, and I don't even think about what Torah portion. But the Haftarah is special for me because I don't do it a lot, and I remember my Haftarah, at least the first part of it, I remember it by heart, and if I remember lo Yehonatan Machar Chodesh Vayiv Karata Ki Yipaked Moshavecha, and I know that by heart. So, anyways, that part is literally just the first verse, which again says tomorrow is the new moon, and Jonathan says to David, "You'll be missed if you don't show up at the Rosh Chodesh party." And it's a great story of David and Jonathan and how they, if you remember the story, they're best friends, even though Jonathan's father Saul wants to kill David. And it's just a story of how they try to remain friends, retain their friendship in the midst of that tension. And it's a very beautiful story. And anyways, it's, the Haftarah is only part of the story, but the whole story of David and Jonathan is a very interesting story, and some people have studied it and discussed it. But we're going to look at the Torah portion at Kev, and then we're going to get into it. And what we read last week in Ve'er Hanan, the second portion of Deuteronomy, is we had a chance to actually, and let me get this up here on the screen. We had a chance to look at how Moses in these weeks starts to talk to the people about what rules they have to follow. And Ve'er Hanan and Ekev both take us back to Mount Sinai, where Moses says, look, this is where we got the laws. And it wasn't just the 10 commandments. Last week, we read the 10 commandments, but Moses says it wasn't just the 10 commandments. But you folks, if you remember, you only wanted to hear the 10 commandments, because after the 10 commandments, you said, we don't want to hear this anymore. So I get the rest of the laws, and I told them to you before, which we did get in the rest of Exodus and Leviticus, but we didn't get all the laws we're about to get, which again means that Deuteronomy does function as a Torah on its own to some extent. And again, there is the theory that it was a Torah, if you will, on its own, that Deuteronomy was originally kind of read as a law book, as a covenantal book that was composed during the reign of King Josiah, king of Judah, one of King David's descendants, great grandchild 400 years later, that King Josiah tries to get the people to covenant to the laws, and the laws in Deuteronomy. And as we mentioned, this week, next week, and the week after, really Re'eh through Shoftim, and then Kiteitzeh, as we said, it's about 200 of the 600 commandments are just in those three portions. So there's 54 portions. You'd think there'd be roughly, on average, there'd be 10 commandments per portion, a little over. Of course, some portions don't have any commandments, like the book of Genesis only has the commandment to circumcise a child. There's no commandments in there, so that would take the average down to maybe about 20 commandments per chapter. But again, there's a lot in Exodus and a lot in Numbers. There's a lot of portions there that don't have commandments, and so the average number of mitzvot would go up. But again, it's not like that, because there are some portions that have lots of mitzvot, and there are other ones that really don't have a lot. So let's get into it and look at Akev. It begins with the words, And if you do obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that he made on oath with your fathers, which again, the word brit, the word covenant, is what we talk about from Mount Sinai. And again, that's what we read right here at the end of Ve'elchanan, the instruction, the mitzvah, the chukim, the laws, the commandments, the rules, the mishpatim that I command you this day. And again, it's a continuity and to some extent a re-covenanting that Moses is telling the next generation. Your parents did this at Mount Sinai, and now we're doing it here before we cross over. And again, whenever anyone read the book of Deuteronomy, and when we're reading the book of Deuteronomy right now, Hayom, this day, it becomes part of a reaffirmation of the covenant. And here's what it says will happen to you if you follow the covenant. He will favor you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the issue of your womb and the produce of your soil, your new grain and wine and oil, the calving of your herd and the lambing of your flock, in the land that he swore to your fathers to assign to you. You shall be blessed above all other peoples, and there shall be no sterile male or female among you or among your livestock. And it really does use those words, that the word barren, the word akar and akara, it says barren for both male and female. The word akar here is the male form and akara is barren. And again, it's for your animals and for all your people amongst you. The Lord will ward off from you sickness. So even before sickness is being fertile, which is interesting, which kind of shows you the priorities that people had. They didn't want to, they wanted to be able to have children, and also now sickness. He will not bring upon you any of the dreadful diseases of Egypt about which you know, but will inflict them on your enemies. So you won't get the sicknesses of Egypt, your enemies will. You shall destroy all the peoples that the Lord your God delivers to you, showing them no pity, and you shall not worship their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Should you say to yourselves, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? You need to have no fear of them, but to bear in mind what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians, the wondrous acts that you saw with your own eyes, the signs and the portents, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God liberated you. Thus will the Lord your God do to all the peoples you now fear. And so Moses is telling them, yeah, it's natural for you to look at these other nations, the Canaanites that you're about to conquer. It's natural for you to look at them and say, there's no way for you to do it. But just remember what we did to the Egyptians. Remember what God did. Just remember that, because these people are nothing compared. The Egyptians are much more powerful than the Canaanites. And look at how quickly he got rid of them. Look at the kind of miracles that God did for you and for your parents and grandparents in the land of Egypt. So just imagine what God is going to do, can do, and what has done, and what God will do if need be when you're in this new land as you're about to go. So again, I understand they're more numerous than you. There's no, well, maybe they're not more numerous than you. God will protect you. So, and it says all the people you now fear. It doesn't say you might fear them. Moses is telling them, I know you fear them. The Lord your God will also send a plague against them until those who are left in hiding perish before you. Do not stand in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will dislodge those peoples before you little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them at once, else the wild beasts will multiply to your hurt. And so there's a very interesting detail here, which is, so why doesn't God just destroy them like God destroyed the Egyptians over the period of months, maybe again a year? The plagues might have been gone on for about a year. Why doesn't God just wipe out all the Canaanites? And so, look, if we follow the theory that this is written 400 years after the events, 500 years after the events, during the time of not even King David, the time of Moses would have been 500 or 600 years before King Josiah. So this is written again many, many years later. If that's the case, they all know that the Canaanites didn't get wiped out all at once. They know that. So to say it in a way to basically explain why it didn't happen makes sense, because they know it. They know that it didn't happen all at once. But there's another issue here, which they kind of get to right away, which is the reason why they wouldn't have been wiped out all at once is because if there's nobody there, then the cities become ghost towns, and then animals, wild animals, would have moved in. And without the Canaanites essentially running the operations and keeping these cities inhabitable, it would have been a disaster. You wouldn't have been able to come in and kind of take over the wells, the cities, etc., from the Canaanites. So it had to happen over years. Okay. Of course, we know that that's a problem, because the longer that they interacted with the Canaanites, the more Canaanite they became, the more they worshiped Canaanite gods, and the more influenced by the Canaanites they became. So that was the trade-off, if you will. But there's the answer for why it didn't happen all at once. Because the wild beasts would multiply to your hurt. It would hurt you. So the Lord your God will deliver them up to you, throwing them into utter panic until they're wiped out. He will deliver their kings into your hand, and you shall obliterate their name from under the heavens. No man shall stand up to you until you have wiped them out. You shall consign the images of their gods to the fire. You shall not covet the silver and gold on them, and keep it for yourselves, lest you be ensnared thereby. For it is an abhorrent to the Lord, is abhorrent, it's a toeva to God. And what's so interesting about that is that it actually says, don't look at the silver and gold statues and go, hey, it's just silver and gold. It's just, it's valuable. I'm not going to burn it. I'm not going to destroy it. It's silver and gold. I got to keep it. It's got value. No, the Torah says that's not an answer. You will worship it if you keep it around. So destroy it. It's an abomination. It's abhorrent to God. Get rid of it. So don't say, well, it's just I'm just a collector, right? I just look at it and go, oh, this is just something of value. Nope. You're going to wind up keeping it if you do it. And again, this is one of the reasons why people didn't keep statuary in Judaism, just because it looked pretty. They would say, no, this is somebody later on might worship it as an idol. So they didn't believe in keeping statuary, even for collector, for collector value, if you will. So do not bring it into your house. You will be proscribed like it. You must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is proscribed. So it is cherem. It is something that is supposed to be taken and destroyed. It is excommunicated. That is the word that we use for something that we destroy, that becomes excommunicated. It's cherem. And this is what has to happen to the idols. They have to be destroyed. And we have a end of that chapter, and the 8th chapter begins like the 7th chapter, which is why it's a natural chapter break. You shall faithfully observe all the instruction that I enjoin upon you today, that you may thrive and increase and be able to possess the land that the Lord promised to your forefathers. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has made you travel in the wilderness these past 40 years, that he might test you by hardships to learn what was in your hearts, whether you would keep his commandments or not. Now, here, it's an interesting other side to this, which is you and I have already heard in Deuteronomy that this was a punishment, to be in the wilderness for 40 years. The previous generation was not ready to come in. But here another reason is given, which is that next generation would also be tested by hardships to see whether they would do better, whether they would keep the commandments. So it is actually a twofold purpose to the 40 years, to have that other generation die off, but also to test and to challenge the new generation. Very interesting. He subjected you to hardship of hunger, and they gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your fathers had ever known, in order to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but that man may live on anything that God, the Lord, decrees. And again, everybody thinks that the words "man does not live by bread alone" comes from the Christian Bible or from Shakespeare. I've heard a lot of I've heard a lot of places where they think it comes from. It comes from Deuteronomy. It comes from the first time it's ever used is right here. Well, I shouldn't say that. The first time that any human being had ever written it down or said it that we have on record is right here. It could be that was a phrase that people knew or said in other contexts before that. But it's a beautiful phrase, and it's one that, again, has become part of other faiths, and other people have turned to the phrase "Lo al halechem levado." Man does not. We do not live on bread alone. Yeah, Adam. Man does not live on it. It's not. Well, that's not the whole phrase, because the phrase says, "But man may live on anything that the Lord decrees," and that's the part that we usually don't say in the quote, though I think people know what it means, that we need to have more than physical sustenance, but the phrase in Hebrew is really powerful, because the word that's used in Hebrew, it's ki al motzah, on what man, a man does not live on bread levado by itself, but on the motzah that God brings forward. And the word motzah is the word for motzi. It's the word that we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that God brings forth bread, lechem. So those words motzeh and lechem are oftentimes used in conjunction with each other. God brings forth food for lechem, bread, literally bread for us to eat. But what's interesting about it here in the way that it's read in Deuteronomy, and again, how we see the full context of it, is that what God brings forth that really matters is, again, what we're sustained on. And it was manna. It was God literally saying, you don't need bread. The manna will suffice because it's a gift from me. It's still food, by the way. I mean, that's the interesting thing. It is God providing for your food. And again, it's not like they didn't have food. They had manna. So it's not like you don't live on bread, you live on God's teachings. It's more you live on what God provides for you, and that God will provide physical sustenance for you. It just might not always be bread.
And what he's saying is that what I provide for you provides all the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that you need for survival.
Yep.
What I give you is what you need for survival.
Yep. And if you think about it now, I think you just hit on it too, especially for those of us who've done keto diets where we can't have any bread at all. And I've done it. I've done it for weeks. Yeah, it's very interesting. What happens is that our bodies actually are addicted to the sugars and to the flour. And I'm in one of those cycles right now where I'm eating bread. It actually really does create an imbalance in the body. And several people have said that part of the problem of one of the problems of our diets is not just that we eat too much meat, it's also that we eat too much bread, because our ancestors really couldn't afford to eat bread as much as they did. If they had grains, they would oftentimes have grains that were either whole grains, they would have cracked nuts or, cracked flour, things like that were in some cases enabled and helped our digestion because it had fiber. And again, most of the bread that we eat, and again, I'm guilty as much as anybody, if not more, it's bleached flour that has all the goodness already sapped out of it. So it's an interesting thing that the Bible actually tells us that the food that God gives us is actually, we cannot be sustained by bread alone. I mean, that's really one of the important things is
right.
It's actually true. It's actually the simplistic thinking. And in those days, the only people who could really live on bread were the wealthy. It was really the wealthy kings and rulers that would be able to have bread all the time. Most of the other people had to eat, whatever they could grow, whatever vegetables, whatever they could take from their flock, and very rarely had the means to have flour, or to definitely have the kind of flour that we eat today. So it's very interesting that the Bible is actually kind of warning us about thinking that we could just live on bread. You can't. And this is where we read it first. So that's the physical sustenance. And then it also talks about this: the clothes upon you did not wear out, nor did your feet swell those 40 years. Bear in mind that the Lord your God disciplines you just as a man disciplines his son. Well, we'll read the next line. Therefore, keep the commandments of God, your God, walk in his ways and revere him. And what's interesting about that is that, and then it talks about the clothes and the shoes. And it basically tells us that, again, you also didn't have to get clothes during, and which is put out as a miracle. So just like we had manna, we also didn't have to have clothes. Our clothes did not wear out during those 40 years. That's not what it was supposed to happen, which kind of, again, begs the question, how would the Israelites have been clothed during that time? No, they did have flocks. It says they had flocks in the wilderness, but clearly they did not have the moving from place to place. You don't have the ability to have the kind of industries and the factories in those days that were literally like, a weaving shop or a tanning place. You really have to be set up for weeks and months, if not years, to be able to kind of establish those types of industries. Well, they didn't need to, because according to the book of Deuteronomy, and this isn't a midrash, this is in the book itself, their clothes did not wear out, which kind of is an interesting, well, obviously it's a miracle, but they actually draw an interesting thing here, which is that if you walk in God's ways and revere him, essentially your shoes don't even wear out. And again, it's not really easy to see, but it's kind of implied, and it is connected, because you have your feet didn't swell and you didn't have to worry about your shoes and those kind of things. Because again, you're not walking, if you're walking in God's ways, it doesn't even matter if you're walking through the wilderness, your shoes are not going to wear out. You're not going to have bad things happen to you like that. And again, God treats us again like children are treated by their parents, with discipline, but the relationship is one of a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it says, the Lord is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill. Now, that is a beautiful description of the land of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
It is in Eretz Tovah. It's a beautiful land, and it has all of the great physical features that you could have that would give you food and life. And here, so that's the geographical description. And now we have a description of the flora, of the products that come out of the land. And this is really important. A land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olive trees, and honey. And that is the description of what we call the 7 species. And those 7 things, wheat, barley, grapes, that's the vines, that's the geffen. And you know the word geffen, borod prehagafen, figs, pomegranates, olives, and honey, which is davash, usually, by the way, understood to be not bee honey, but davash, the honey that comes from the date palm. So that's why we usually represent the davash by dates and not by bees. That these products are all what we call the 7 species, the plants of sustenance, the food sources in Israel, the 7 species. So these 7 species are used, the tradition on Tu B'Shvat, on the holiday of the trees, that we celebrate with these kinds of foods. There's also a tradition of using these items as decorations in Jewish books. And when you have like kind of your earliest illustrated or Bibles with or Haggadot with images in them, remember, because we weren't supposed to use animals or people in the imagery oftentimes. And again, some people did, but oftentimes they didn't. If they weren't going to do that, they would use these images of nature. And what did they turn to? Specifically these 7 symbols. And so we'd oftentimes see these symbols being used: the date palm, the pomegranate, oftentimes used grapevines. These symbols are used oftentimes in artwork, and I will tell you, even in next time you're in my house, which I hope will be soon, you'll look at our hopefully you'll see my wife, our ketubah. Our ketubah has a paper cut. It's a paper cut by our door, and it actually has the 7 species in the paper cut there, the 7 species of Israel. So we talk about the land flowing with milk and honey. That's another phrase that we have, which you'll see. But the milk and honey, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, is an easier phrase, I would say, because it's just milk and honey. But what's interesting about that is that it's the milk, the chalav is definitely from animals, right? So that's either cows or more likely sheep and goats. As reality, that's the more likely source for the milk. That's an animal product, which is another level of produce or product, if you will. But if you think about it, that is another level, just like bread is, of human interaction and something that we need to do something in order to make it happen. These things, according to the Torah, and again, I guess you could say, and by the way, don't anybody say that I'm not saying that human beings haven't spent a lot of time genetically engineering grapes and pomegranates and every kind of food that we have today is the product of not 2 generations of genetic engineering, but 100 generations of genetic engineering, where people liked certain kinds of vines, they liked certain kinds of barley, etc., and they selected and bred those kinds of things. But these things appear and can appear without us doing anything, meaning that if we're good and we follow the Torah and we do what we're supposed to do, the land will give us these things. And it helps when you have a good farmer tending to them, but they're natural in occurrence. They don't require you to go out and milk the goat. It doesn't require you to bake it into a cake. You can have the wheat and barley, and again, most people have it in bread and they grind it down, but you don't actually need to have it in order to. You can have cracked wheat. You can eat. You can chew on cracked barley, and people did, and it literally will sustain you. And so these are just things that pop right out of the earth and don't require us to herd or tend to them or create them. Again, in order to get the davash out, we have to squeeze the tamar, but it doesn't require us to grind it or bake it or do anything else. It's literally you squeeze it, and technically speaking, you get the honey when you bite into it. The honey comes out, the juice is there. So it is a land with, again, if you do what you're supposed to do, and if God is happy with you, you can live off the land without anything else, without a cow, without a donkey, without plowing, you can technically literally walk through the land. And it's almost an Eden-like setting, because again, you can walk through the gardens and just literally pluck the food off and be sustained by it. So it's really a beautiful image. And it continues with that kind of description. A land where you may eat food without stint, which I don't really love that translation of the word stint, but again, it doesn't end. Where you will lack nothing. A land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper, which again was one of the most valuable metals even back then, because it was used for, unfortunately, oftentimes, obviously for cooking, it was also used for war. Copper was one of the main objects for smithies for what we call the Bronze Age, where again you had iron, you have copper, right, which is barzel is the iron, and nechoshet, which is copper. You put those things together, you get bronze, and this is the Bronze Age. So it kind of makes sense that those are the metals that they're talking about. These are metals, unfortunately, that are oftentimes used for war. But if you have them, you can go to war, and you don't have to worry about where you're going to get these things from. You don't have to import them. Now, here's a very important line. And again, this is a beautiful line too. Not as famous as the other lines, but it is actually said very frequently. And I'll explain why. So it says right here in verse 10, V'achalta v'savata u'varachta et Adonai Elohecha al ha'aretz ha'tava asher natan lach. I almost want to sing it every time I say it because it's part of the Birkat Hamazon. It's part of the blessing that we say after we eat food. And again, the tradition is to say the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals. We say it every time we have a meal. So ideally 3 times a day, we say Birkat Hamazon. And the first blessing is Al Haaretz ve'Al Hamazon, which is for, Hazanat HaKol is the very first blessing, is the blessing over everything, all the food. But the next blessing, the second blessing, is Al Haaretz ve'Al Hamazon, for the land and for the food. And that blessing begins, doesn't begin, but the end of that blessing, if you will, begins with V'achalta v'savato v'rachta et Adonai Elohecha, which is when you've eaten your fill, give thanks to the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. And so the tradition is after thanking God for our food, we're actually supposed to thank God for the land and for the food, for the land that gives forth the food. And all ha'aretz, again, ideally, if we're in the land of Israel, we're actually blessing the land of Israel, which is, well, it doesn't say it has to be in the land of Israel, which is why the tradition for thousands of years is for Jewish people, our ancestors for thousands of years have uttered these words after they've eaten food, which is thank you, God. And why? Because it says when you've eaten, and by the way it is in Hebrew is a little different. V'achalta, v'savata, uvarachta. It's actually 3 verbs. When you've eaten and when you feel satiated. That's the word savata, which means to be satisfied. When you've eaten and you're satisfied, you bless. And those 3 steps, eat, be satisfied, and bless, which is one of the reasons why the tradition is that if you just have a snack, if you're going into your closet and you pick up a Cliff Bar out of the closet, you're not having a meal, you don't have to say Birkat Hamazon because technically you're not satisfied. If you've eaten and are satisfied and you're full, then you can bless, and you should bless, because again, the eating and the kind of the middle, the next step is being satisfied, and then you say, thank you, God, for the food that you've given me and for the land. And so that's why we actually say this line as part of the Birkat Hamazon, because it actually says to do that in the Torah, and that's what we're doing. When we do the blessing, we're actually fulfilling this commandment. It says you bless. And so what do? We say those words, V'achalta v'savata u'varachta, and you thank God for your food. And so that is that recognition, that gratitude that we have after we've eaten. So that's a really powerful line, which reminds us to be satisfied, which, by the way, is another important issue when it comes to food. And I don't want to skip over that. Which is that we are supposed to eat and be satisfied. We're not supposed to hold ourselves back from enjoying our food. We're actually supposed to eat and be satisfied. It's not good for us to be holding back and not giving our body sustenance, because it doesn't say eat and bless. It says eat, be satisfied, and be blessed and bless. And again, satisfied is probably not a good translation, which is why I said the word satiated a little bit. It's more to be full. Savat means to be full. And so we're supposed to actually eat. And again, people are going to say, well, you're not supposed to eat until you're full. Well, actually, what our bodies do when we're eating and eating in a healthy manner is we have hunger cues that we're supposed to listen to. And if we eat to the point of being satisfied and not depriving ourselves, then we actually know, and if we're eating in a healthy way all the time, that our body actually tells us when we're satisfied and we're not withholding food from ourselves. And again, I know people sometimes diet and some people have to diet, but the idea is, even when you're dieting, and most dietitians will tell you this, even if you're on some type of restriction, you're not supposed to have salt, you're not supposed to have gluten, whatever it is you're not supposed to have, dietitians don't tell you, but don't eat till you're full. They tell you to eat a healthy meal. And nobody says, well, cut your food in half and go to bed hungry. What people will say is, look, if you're trying to lose weight for a health reason, or you're trying to cut back, you're still supposed to be on a healthy diet plan. And this is very important. The interesting thing is the Torah actually tells us that. It actually tells us you don't just eat and bless, you eat, you be satisfied, be full, and bless. And this is part of it. And again, when you've eaten your fill is not a great translation, because it merges together the two verbs, which is to eat, to be full, which is a verb in itself, savata, and then to give thanks, which is obviously the other verb here. So those three things go together: eating, being full, being satiated, and blessing. So we go back to kind of the general feeling of this portion. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep his commandments, his rules, and his laws, which I enjoin you upon today. So there's kind of like the caution. We're going to get to it again. When you've eaten your fill, which again is that word, savata again, when you've eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in. So again, now talking about the next step, which is when you're in your land and you're living safely in your land, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its seraph serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought water forth for you and from the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. And you say to yourselves, my own power and my own might have won this wealth for me. Remember, it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth, in fulfillment of the covenant that he made with you on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. Now, this is a really, 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 really powerful set of verses, because what it's telling us again is that don't forget where you came from. And I think it's a really beautiful way that every generation almost needs to be reminded of, especially our generations in the last few generations, which are generations that have really, really become very successful in this country. And I'm talking about the Jewish community. Because when we look at our success in this country, what's happened, of course, is that as we've done this, our hearts indeed have grown haughty, and we've forgotten the Lord who freed us out of the land of Egypt, or who brought us forth out of Poland and Russia and Eastern Europe with absolutely nothing on our backs. And that's what it says. This terrible hardship, right? This hardship. This is what life was like in the shtetl, right? It was a terrible, for most people, a terrible place to live. And if it didn't have seraph serpents, which are again, are fire-breathing dragons, if you will, and scorpions, it had people that wanted to kill you. And people are even more dangerous than serpents and scorpions, because they're smart enough to know where to find you when you're trying to hide from them. This is a real powerful line for us, because the Torah takes into consideration the fact, and again, could be speaking after the fact, after it already happened. It knows that what happens when people get full of their own success, that they forget where they came from. And they forget that they didn't do this. Their success is not their own success. And everybody says, well, I did this. I created this company. I love when I hear, kids, who are, starting their own, they've released their own IPO, and they've started their own, their own company, whether it's a Zuckerberg, or whether it's, the half a dozen other multi-billionaire young Jews of the next generation who have created enormous wealth in companies like Instagram and pretty much any company you can mention that is not every company, but so many of them were founded by young Jewish entrepreneurs. But almost all of those young Jewish entrepreneurs were not raised in poverty. They were raised at a level of affluence and success that allowed them to have the education and to go to a Harvard, or or have parents who were a safety net for them, so that they could develop these skills and these success stories. Every one of those success stories that we can think of, almost every one, I haven't heard of one where this was a person who rose from literally nothing, from poverty, from being an orphan. At least in the Jewish community, the ones that I know of, these are for the most part upper middle class at worst, kids who had tremendous advantages that they built their foundation on. And again, they forget it's not from their own power. And again, the power comes from God. At the end of the day, it says, remember, it's the Lord your God who gives you the power. But on the other hand, look, it's pretty obvious that this lack of recognition of how lucky they are to have the ability to succeed, whether it was their grandparent or great grandparent who made that journey to the new world with nothing and with just hope and courage, or their parents who worked hard and who in some cases worked 70 80 hours a week so that their family could have something. And the people who worked in the schmata business, or the people who worked in pharmacies or what candy stores in the Bronx or wherever else, so that their kids and grandkids could be successful. I mean, the obvious stories are all around us and in our own families, all around us. And it's very sad that people don't have that recognition of how lucky they are, and where this comes from. There's a complete lack of understanding that they've had not one generation, but in some cases 2 or 3 generations to build on. And it is very frightening to me, the fact that there's this lack of understanding, and it is leading to a sense of entitlement. It's leading to a sense of ingratitude, and it's leading to a sense of a lack of civic duty, where people literally think that, well, it's my money, I created it, and I don't have to take care of my parents or grandparents, let alone the person down the street who again is my neighbor, is my brother. And again, God commands us multiple times to make sure that the widows and orphans are taken care of. Well, if you don't care about that, if you don't see any sense of religious obligation, you're not going to take care of those people. So it's very frightening, the fact that we live at a time when this line here, my own power and might have brought this wealth to me. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at people and just wanted to shake them and say, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Do you know how hard your grandparents or great grandparents worked, or what they sacrificed, or what kind of faith and what kind of risk they took to get you to be able to say that? It's so powerfully real in our generation. I just want to tell you, when I read those lines from the Torah, I literally have to say to myself, how can people not see this? How are they oblivious to the fact that we're living like this today, right now? Now, the thing that we will say, what's the challenge? What are the things today? We're not worried about idolatry per se. As Moses tells them, if you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you will certainly perish. Now, again, he tells them, we're worried about idolatry. We're worried about these other gods. Now, of course, today we would say that those other gods are all around us. They're not necessarily Canaanite gods, statues, but they are the modern equivalents, the modern idolatries that become as dangerous and as deceptive and as destructive as idols were to our ancestors. So the fact that they're not statues isn't really, that's the superficial window dressing to the bigger issue, which is, yeah, but you're worshiping these gods, right? And so for people who worship the modern equivalents of these gods, God's saying, look, I'm warning you, you're going to perish. You will be doomed if you do it. And that's the word, ki avod toavdon, which is it's destruction. It's certainly perish. It's the repetition of the word avod, which is with an aleph, which is destruction. It's utter destruction, which is why it says you shall certainly perish. You will perish, and in the repetition of it, it's certainly perish. And it says, this is like the nations that the Lord will cause to perish before you. The Canaanites are going to perish for the same reasons. So it's not just me telling you you're going to perish. It is, you're going to see it happen to the Canaanites. You're going to literally, there'll be a proof, an example right in front of you. And so don't say, can it happen? It's happening. The reason that you're coming into the land is because that nation did it, and they're going to perish. Now you wonder, like, how did the Canaanites, did they have a warning? Did God tell them, you better not do this, otherwise I'm going to bring in the Israelites for you? We don't have that side of the story, but we do have an example of the way at least the writers of Deuteronomy, or again the teachers of Judaism during this time, or again the way Deuteronomy presents it, which is all we have. The reading of this is that the Canaanites didn't get destroyed because God said, this is the promised land of the Israelites. They got destroyed because they deserved to be destroyed. It wasn't just because God said, well, I have to give the land to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says they deserved it. They deserved it. They deserved the destruction that they're having. So that's very important. And again, because you can do this, because I'm helping you, let it be a lesson to you. Pay attention to what's about to happen, because I don't want the same thing to happen to you. And here we have another Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, which again, not the Shema Yisrael that we read a couple chapters ago. This is chapter 9, but the theme, as we say in Deuteronomy, those words are repeated many times. Hear, O Israel, or as we're going to read in this week's portion, look. So hear, look, pay attention, see, listen. The way that the Torah tells us, the way Moses is putting God's words into our head or into our minds, is by paying attention, sensory perception, to actually hear, see. If you're an auditory listener, if you're a visual listener, it doesn't matter. You are going to have to listen to this message I'm going to tell you. Please pay attention. And here's another one. Hear, O Israel. You are about to cross the Jordan to go and dispossess nations greater and more populous. And you can see the theme repeated over and over again. They're more popular, they're more powerful than you, they're more populous, there's more of them. Great cities with walls, sky high, a people great and tall, the Anakites of whom you have knowledge, for you have heard it said, who can stand up to the children of Anak? These Anakites are like giants. Know then this day that none other than the Lord your God is crossing at your head, devouring fire. He's a devouring fire God. And that's the word that's used. It's fire in front of you. It is he who will wipe them out. He will subdue them before you, that you may quickly dispossess and destroy them as the Lord promised you. Now, again, here it says quickly. Before we heard it's quick, but it's not going to be immediate. So there's a difference between being quick and being, again, it's all at once. It says little by little, but at least part of it is going to be, or the initial attack is going to be, when it happens, it'll be quick because it's not you doing it, it's God. And when the Lord your God has thrust them from your path, say not to yourselves, the Lord has enabled us to possess this land because of our virtues. It is because of the wickedness of those nations that the Lord is dispossessing them before you. And here it says it flat out. It's not because you're so good.
Because they're so bad.
Is they're so bad. And so don't think it's because you deserve it. Now, you and I know, but there is something we deserve, or we don't deserve it, but we are owed this land. This is the payback, right? You'll see in the next verse. It's not because of your virtues and rectitude that you will be able to possess this country, but it's because of their wickedness that the Lord your God is dispossessing those nations before you. And in order to fulfill the oath that the Lord made to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, yeah, it's because they're bad, and it's because I made a promise to them. But again, repeated, it's not for any virtue of yours that the Lord your God has given you this good land to possess. For you are a stiff-necked people. And so here it just says, it doesn't only says you don't have any virtues. I'm going to tell you, you got some problems. And one of them is your stubbornness. You're Am Kashe Oref. You are a stubborn and literally the word stiff-necked people. Remember, never forget. And those words are both used. Zachor al tishkach. Remember, never forget how you provoked the Lord your God to anger in the wilderness. From the day you left the land of Egypt until you reached this place, you've continued defiant toward the Lord. So ever since you left, and that's the Torah has told us that from Exodus all the way through Numbers, every step of the way, the people have continuously let God down. At Horeb, you so provoked the Lord that the Lord was angry enough to have you destroyed, right? And this is the golden calf. That, for Moses' retelling, is one of the biggest screw-ups. It's not the only one. We already read about the spies. We already read how that created the 40 years, which again, we have another reading, which we read already today, which is that it was also to test you. But the punishment for those two things, for the golden calf and for the sin of the spies, we have read. But there's just the general, you never stopped being a problem. But here we are at Mount Sinai. I had ascended the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord your God made with you. And I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, eating no bread and drinking no water. So again, not even bread or water. Definitely there, not bread alone. There it's nothing. And the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God with the exact words that the Lord had addressed to you on the mountain of fire on the day of assembly. And what's interesting about this, of course, is that here it says flat out. And by the way, you notice here still, it calls them the 2 tablets of stone. It does not call them the 10 commandments. It calls them the 2 tablets of stone. That's how they've been referred to a few times already. It's also the tablets of the covenant, right? Luchot Habrit. Luchot Habrit and the Luchot Ha'avanim. They're called the same thing. Well, they're not called the same thing. They're called 2 things, the same. They're the same thing. They're not called the 10 commandments here, though. They're called the tablets of stone and the tablets of covenant. And there they use synonymously. They're used, it's not like they're separate things. It says they're called the tablets of stone or the tablets of the covenant. And it says specifically, those were the exact words that you heard. Those were nothing other than the hard copy of what you already heard at Mount Sinai. At the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of covenant. Again, same words. And the Lord said to me, hurry down from here at once, for the people who you brought from Egypt have acted wickedly, and they have been quick to stray from the path that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten image. And that's pretty much what does happen. God says the people that you brought out, and of course it's funny because, well, you brought them out too, God. But here it's like, they're your kids. What did your child do today? And the Lord further said to me, I see this as a stiff-necked people. Let me alone and I will destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make you a nation far numerous than they. That also happened. That is pretty much what happened. Now, I started down the mountain. And again, this is Moses saying it. Now watch what happens. A mountain ablaze with fire, the 2 tablets of the covenant in my 2 hands. And here it's very much Moses telling you, I was carrying it. I was coming down the mountain, tablets of covenant in my 2 hands. I saw how you sinned against the Lord your God, and you made yourselves a molten calf. You had been quick to stray from the path the Lord had enjoined upon you. Thereupon I gripped the 2 tablets and flung them away with both my hands, smashing them before your eyes. Okay. So it's a little bit more dramatic than the way we have it earlier in Exodus. But here it gets really, really, well, it's Moses' version of what happened. So far, again, though, not really that different. But listen to this. I threw myself down before the Lord, eating no bread and drinking no water 40 days and 40 nights as before, because of the great wrong you had committed, doing what displeased the Lord and vexing him. For I was in dread of the Lord's fierce anger against you, which moved him to wipe you out. And at that time, too, the Lord gave heed to me. Now, okay, still pretty much the same. I I engaged God and deflected his wrath on your behalf, but I did it. Now watch what happens though. Moreover, the Lord was angry with Aaron to have destroyed him. So I interceded for Aaron at that time. We didn't read that in Exodus. We didn't read that. It's not there. We never read why Aaron doesn't get punished. We never read, we have Moses confronting Aaron, and Aaron simply says, I threw in the gold and out came a calf. And that's the end of it. But we don't hear what God's reaction is to it. And we never hear this, which is that Moses has to intercede on behalf of his brother. Now, it makes sense. It's not that it's like, whoa, how could he have done that? Or why would he have done that? No, it makes sense. God was mad at Aaron. But it says here specifically that God was mad at Aaron, which we don't have in Exodus. And so here we have Moses doing something very interesting, which is really standing up for Aaron. What's interesting about this, what's really interesting about this, is we're in chapter, we're almost at the end of chapter 9, I believe, of Deuteronomy. Now, again, Deuteronomy is Moses' telling of this. But here we are at Mount Sinai, which is chapter 20 of Exodus. And you haven't missed it. But Aaron hasn't had a real place in the book of Deuteronomy. In Exodus, Aaron, if you recall, is with Moses all the time, with like very rarely is Aaron not by Moses' side. And here in Deuteronomy, he's not really there. And when he is there, God wants to kill him. So Aaron doesn't come across in this version looking anywhere near where he looks in Exodus and Leviticus. So if we only had the book of Deuteronomy, we're here in chapter 9, and Aaron is not looking good. As for the sinful thing that you made, the calf, I took it and put it in the fire. I broke it to bits and ground it thoroughly until it was fine as dust, and I threw its dust in the brook that comes down from the mountain. A little bit more detail than we had earlier, but again, you provoked the Lord. By the way, because again, I threw it into the brook that comes down from the mountain, and then I made you drink it, is what happens in Exodus. It doesn't say that here. Again, you provoked the Lord at Taberah and at Massah and at Kibrot Hata'avah. And these are all places that happened all around that time. These are things that, again, God was tested by the people. We don't have food. We don't want to just eat manna. He gives them the quail, all those kinds of things. They, all those places, Taberah, Massah, Kibrot Hata'avah. These are all places where God was driven mad by the people. And when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land I'm giving you, you flouted the command of the Lord. You did not put your trust in him and obey him. And that is this incident of the spies. And so you have Moses telling the people, okay, this is where we screwed up. We screwed up at Mount Sinai, and we also screwed up at Taberah and Massah and Kibrot Hata'avah. And guess what? We also screwed up really big at Kadesh Barnea with the spies. When you had a chance to take possession of the land and you weren't ready to do it. You flouted the command of the Lord. You didn't put your trust in him. So you did not listen to him. You wouldn't do it. I tried to tell you to do it. You wouldn't do it. And you did not obey God. Now, as long as I've known you, you've been defiant toward the Lord. And we already read about, by the way, in Deuteronomy, how bad the situation of the spies was. But here, again, chapter 9, we're going to hear it again. When I lay prostrate before the Lord those 40 days and 40 nights, because the Lord determined to destroy you, I prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord God, do not annihilate your very own people, whom you redeemed in your majesty and whom you freed from Egypt with a mighty hand. Give thought to your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and pay no heed to the stubbornness of this people, its wickedness and its sinfulness. Else the country from which you freed us will say, it's because the Lord was powerless to bring them into the land that he promised them, and because he rejected them, that he brought them out there to die in the wilderness. Yet you, your very own people whom you freed with your great might, yet they are your very own people whom you freed with your great might and your outstretched arm. And it's a slightly different way that it says it in earlier in the book of Numbers, but it is similar, which is that remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, remember the promise you made to them, and remember what other people are going to say. If you destroy the Israelites, they're going to say, that God's crazy. That God brought them out. That's God's people, and then he destroyed them all. That's because he's not a real God. And so Moses again appeals to God's vanity, if you will, or God's sense of negative PR, where he says, people aren't going to like you, God, if you destroy your own people. So that is a version of what we read earlier. But again, it's Moses praying on behalf of the people. And here at Kadesh Barnea, it says that Moses did it again for 40 days and 40 nights. It says again here, the sin of the spies, that it happens to us here at this stage right here, that Moses has to intervene for us. And it happens that, look, if you look at the tradition that this was Tisha B'Av, when the spies messed up, this horrible day in Jewish history, that it becomes that day. Well, roughly 40 days later, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's not quite 40 days, but roughly a month and a half after Tisha B'Av, 7 weeks later or so, we have this. So after Moses goes through a period of praying on our behalf, we're forgiven. And again, to some extent, that's what we hope happens during this period right now. We're in that 40-day period from Tisha B'Av all the way to Rosh Hashanah. We're in the midst of that right now, where we believe that we can pray and get a second chance, if you will. So here, it doesn't say it earlier in Numbers. A few months ago, we read this in Shlach Lecha. We don't read about Moses praying and fasting for 40 days and 40 nights there. So, and here's an interesting thing. Okay, so well, actually, you know what? I just realized this one right here is now going to go in chapter 10 back. It's back to Mount Sinai. And what happens here is Moses telling the people how he made the second set of commandments. So he skips back to Mount Sinai. And well, let's look at what happens here. God said, carve out the 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain and make an ark of wood. And I will inscribe on the tablets that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you shall deposit them in the ark. And here it says that God inscribed on the commandments, the second set of commandments, which is a little different than the tradition that we have in Exodus, which is that Moses kind of wrote the second commandments, or at least in this version, Moses carves out the tablets. And so he does part of the work himself, which is that Moses does do some of the work first, which is that he carves out the tablets and then Moses writes on them. Even though, again, we kind of have a tradition that Moses wrote the second set of tablets. And it says, I will inscribe them upon them, and like the first tablets that you smashed, you shall deposit them in the ark. Now, what's interesting about this too, there's 2 points I want to tell you. What's very strange about this is that it says right here, essentially, that both sets of commandments, well, it doesn't necessarily say it, but the tradition based on this is that both the broken set and the whole set were both in the ark. But that's not my point. The point I want to make here is that God said to Moses, you smashed them. And here it seems pretty explicit that Moses did not have permission to smash the 10 commandments. Moses was mad, but at least in the book of Deuteronomy, when Moses said earlier that he threw them, he tossed them, that wasn't on the request or the encouragement or even the permission of God. Here it seems pretty much that God says to him, you smash them. but you keep both sets, assumedly, so that the people remember that there was a first set. So the people shouldn't just forget about what happened. The fact that they broke the commandments the minute that they had them, right? They made a golden calf right after they had it. Well, the first set of broken commandments reminds them, oh, they could screw up. As a matter of fact, again, you screwed up real quick. So when they look at the broken commandments, they're supposed to learn from it. That's one thing I want to point out. The second thing here, which again, if we only had the book of Deuteronomy, it's kind of interesting because here Moses is commanded to make the ark. And if you think, well, that's what happens, and he shares the stuff with Bezalel and with Aaron and with the Levites. I'm going to read you the next line. I made an ark out of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. The Lord inscribed them on the tablets the same as text as the first. And here it says the 10 commandments that he addressed to you at the mountain. So here it actually calls them the 10 commandments. Okay, it says 10 commandments here. It's the first time it said the 10 commandments. But here it says that Moses made the ark. It does say that. It doesn't just say that he was told to make it, but that he actually made it. And here it doesn't talk about it being covered in gold. Here it says he made a box out of wood, and I put the commandments and I put them in there. It's a very different kind of explanation for it. And what's interesting is that it's almost as if the ark is created for the 10 commandments after they were broken and after he had them. Whereas the way we have it in the Torah is that they're commanded in the Torah portions that we read in Exodus, and we talked about it in Truma and Tetzaveh, they're given commandments on how to build these things. And then of course in the portions Kitisa, they start making it, and then there's the golden calf incident. And then in the last 2 portions that we talk about in Vayakel and Pekudei, they actually make it. But it seems as though like that's not important when Moses is telling it in Deuteronomy. The ark and all the other stuff here isn't really described. The ark is described by itself, and it's that Moses made the ark, and it's to put the commandments, and more importantly, again, that like almost if Moses puts the commandments away in the ark, he won't come down and break them again. I mean, I'm not saying that's what it says, but I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. It's almost like, again, when you read what it actually says, the order that he says it, he actually took the tablets unengraved, put them in a box, and brought them up onto the mountain, and then God finished them, and then he brought them back down in the same box down the mountain. And it's almost as if what I'm saying is that by putting them in the ark and putting them in the Aron, by putting them in there, Moses is immediately going to understand, don't break these. No matter what happens, it's not for breaking. These are for you to keep. They're for you to put them in the box. You're putting them in the box even before you come down with it. You put them in the box, you keep them in the box, they're there in the box, and the box protects them from your rage, Moses. And so we're not going to have that anymore. So it says the Lord inscribed the tablets the same as the first, the 10 commandments that he addressed to you on the mountain of the fire and the assembly. And the Lord gave them to me. So it's the same as the first set that he wrote. And it's the same thing that, again, you heard. So it's not like he gave different commandments. They're the same commandments you already heard. Then I went down the mountain. I deposited the tablets in the ark that I had made, and they're still there as the Lord had commanded me. So this is this interesting idea, again, that the commandments are still in that box. Very interesting. Again, at least by the time of King Josiah, people believed that the 10 commandments that were in the box, in that Aron, in the Ark of the Covenant, were the actual commandments that Moses had brought down from Mount Sinai. Now, from Beirut Bnei Yakan, the Israelites marched to Moserah. Aaron died and was buried there, and his son Eleazar became priest in his stead. Well, hello? That's not where it says that he died in Numbers. a book ago. And Aaron got in trouble at the golden calf, and then he's dead. What else did Aaron do? I don't know. Moses didn't tell us Aaron did anything. Moses in the book of Deuteronomy tells us that Aaron got in trouble, golden calf, and now he's dead. And then his son becomes the high priest after him. That's not what Numbers says. And the issue isn't, well, it's a different place. In Numbers, it says he dies on Mount Hor. Okay, different location for Aaron's grave. The bigger issue is that what does Aaron do in Deuteronomy? He doesn't really do anything. He's really an afterthought. Now, I guess you can make the argument it's not about Aaron. It's about Moses telling the people what they're supposed to do, and that Aaron could be a distraction. But it seems kind of weird that Aaron really isn't mentioned much in Deuteronomy. And I'm not the first person to point that out. Anybody reading it notices that Aaron is really not very present in the book of Deuteronomy. From there, they marched to Gudgod, and from Gudgod to Yotbat, a region of running brooks. At the time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Lord's covenant, to stand in attendance upon the Lord, and to bless his name, as is still the case. That is why the Levites have no hereditary portion among their kinsmen. The Lord is their portion, as the Lord your God spoke concerning them. And again, we read about this in the book of Leviticus, and we read about it in the book of Numbers, that the Levites are set apart. But here, it's almost like that is a weird, that's a weird, that's a weird way of kind of talking about the priests and about the Levites, in that if we're going to summarize the book of Leviticus, is that really the main point? Well, it is by this point, because the book of Deuteronomy is not really that concerned with what the Levites are supposed to do. I stayed on the mountain as I did the first time, 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord heeded me once again, and the Lord agreed not to destroy you. Now, again, they're skipping back to Mount Sinai. I think, yeah. This is still back in Mount Sinai. I stayed on the mount, yeah, as I did the first time. It's about him going back up. And the Lord said to me, up, resume the march at the head of the people, and that they may go and possess the land that I swore to their fathers to give to them. So, he keeps going back to the fact that at Mount Sinai, that's kind of where I took on this role of making sure that you got to the promised land, to where you are now. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God demand of you? Only to revere the Lord your God, to walk in his paths, to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. And that phrase, and keeping the Lord's commandment and laws, which I enjoin upon you this day for your good. So again, that's the summary, if you will, of what Deuteronomy is all about. What does God want us to do? To revere God, to walk in God's paths, and to love God, to serve God, to do it with our hearts and with our soul. So again, that's the words that we see in the Shema. We don't have the last part, the Mo'odecha part, with all of our strength, with all of our energy. But again, the word Hayom over and over again, right? Hayom, this day. Hayom. Mark the heavens to their uttermost reaches. They belong to the Lord your God, the earth and all that is in it. Yet it was to your fathers that the Lord was drawn in his love for them, so that he chose you, their lineal descendants from among all the peoples. This is now the case. So again, it's because of the relationship that God has with us and with you, with your ancestors. Now, again, if this is being read by people 600 years later, they're hearing this message, which is that God chose you because you're the descendants of these people. Cut away, therefore, the thickening about your hearts, and stiffen your necks no more. So again, this is the cutting off the word that's used here, the thickening, is the same word that we have for foreskin. Cut off the oral, cut off the foreskin of your heart. So cut away the thickening, cut away the outer portion of your heart, so that you'll be able to be open. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that number one, it's not a foreskin, obviously, and it's number two, not a heart, because the word levav, with your heart, which is the way we translated it, the way we translate heart usually is not what a good translation of lev is. It is the heart. It's the word used for a heart. But in the Bible, that's understood to be your mind. It's understood to be where you think. So it's your rational thought in addition to your emotions and your passions. It's definitely your rational mind as well. And so what it's really saying is cut away the things that make you hesitant to open up your mind. It really is more of a open your mind, or cut away the inability that you have to open up and to again, to have a rigidity in your thought process that will again free you up and allow you to not just do the things that are easy to do when you're stubborn and when you refuse to change. And you can grow up. You'll have the ability to grow when you cut away that oral, that thickening, if you will. But again, it is the outer wall, if you will, of again taking that off so that you can grow. Which, by the way, if you really want to know from an anthropological or a cultural way what I think really is happening to some extent with the tradition and the mitzvah of circumcision, is that literally I do believe that there is a similarity here, which is why the word aral is used in both to some extent. It's not just it literally is this idea somehow maybe that by cutting off your foreskin that you're actually allowing yourself to procreate in a way that is more abundant and is more and is more open than you would be if you had a foreskin. Now, I will tell you that's a theory, and it's one that is at least based on this idea that the aral, that this outer covering, to some extent, it inhibits our growth. And that's really that's the interesting kind of like connection, if you will, with those words and or with the usage of that word. I want to say the words, it's the same word. It's the context and it's the meaning behind it, the semantics of using that word aral. So just keep in mind that it's very possible that that's what's going on there. The Lord your God is supreme and supreme and Lord supreme. It's God supreme and Lord supreme, which again is the word Elohea Elohim ve'Adonai Adonim, which is a play on both names for God, God and Adonai, Lord and Lord. He's the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanorah. El Elyon, right? This is the words that we say as part of the Amidah. Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanorah, the great, the mighty, the awesome, the powerful God, right? Who knows no favors. This part is not in the Amidah. Al Yisa Panim, velo yikach shochad, that knows no favor and takes no bribe, but upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing him with food and clothing. That's what God does. And if you think it's just will be like God and leave it at that, no, it says explicitly, you too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers to the land of Egypt. You must revere the Lord your God. Only him you shall worship. To him you shall hold fast, and by his name you shall swear. He is your glory, and he is your God, who wrought for you those miracles, those awesome, wondrous deeds, those amazing miracles that you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 people in all, And now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars of the heaven. And once again, think about where you came from. You came from a family of 70 people. And now there's hundreds and thousands and millions of you. And you all came from 70 people. And we know those 70 people. And what's so amazing is we have a reminder again of where you came from. And if you think about how amazing it is that all those people, all of you, all of us are connected to those 70 people, is amazing. It's even more amazing today. It's not less amazing 2,000 years or 3,000 years after this. It's even more amazing that we know genetically that we're connected to those people. That's what's so amazing, is that 3,000 years later, if you could tell Moses that, no, it's not, it didn't just last to the time of King Josiah. It didn't just last to the time of your great grandchildren, but go back and now think about the fact that there's another 3,000 years has passed, and we still know that there's 70 people that we are descended from, and the science has actually proven it. The DNA is actually proven that this is the case. So it's even more miraculous because it's even more time has passed. I mean, so much more time has passed. Love therefore the Lord your God and always keep his charge, his laws, his rules, his mitzvot, his commandments. Take thought this day that it was not your children who neither experienced nor witnessed the lessons of the Lord your God, his majesty, his mighty hand, his outstretched arm, the signs and the deeds that he performed in Egypt against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land. Again, think about what it says. Take heart that it was not your children who neither experienced, right? It's not your children. They're not going to know about this stuff firsthand. What he did to Egypt's army and its horses, its chariots, how the Lord rolled back the waters of the Sea of Reeds where they were all pursuing you, thus destroying them once and for all. What he did for you in the wilderness before you arrived in this place. What he did to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the sons of Reuben, when all the earth opened them up and swallowed them along with their households, along with their tents and every living thing in their train from amidst all of Israel. But it was with your own eyes and all the marvelous deeds that the Lord performed. So here it talks about the Red Sea. Here it talks about all the things that happened in the wilderness. So it's not that we don't ever get the Red Sea, but it's also put in context with the earth swallowing up Dathan and Abiram. What's interesting is who's not mentioned there. Korach, the main guy. He's not mentioned there. And it's interesting that his absence here in this description of Dathan, Abiram, and Bnei Eliav, what's interesting is that Korach isn't mentioned here. And it's almost as if, again, this book is very much a product of the Levites, because the emphasis is not on Aaron. And what also is the interesting thing here is that Korach, one of the Levites, the Levite leader of this revolt, isn't mentioned either. And so what we have is a very powerful and beautiful testament to what the Levites have done, but not so much to the Kohanim, not to the priests, to the Levites, but not to the Kohanim in particular. And again, not to badmouth even any of the Levites who would have been the descendants of Korach, who, by the way, according to tradition, we know that Korach, his children were not like him. The Bnei Korach's sons weren't swallowed up with their father. But again, Korach isn't mentioned. It's interesting what's not mentioned in Deuteronomy. Keep therefore all the instruction that I enjoined upon you Hayom, this day, so that you have the strength to enter and take possession of the land that you are about to cross and possess, and that you may long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your fathers and assigned to their heirs. Here we have a phrase, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land with which you are about to enter and possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come. There the grain you sowed had to be watered by your own labors, like a vegetable garden. But the land you're about to cross into and possess, a land of hills and valleys, soaks up its waters from the rains of heaven. It is a land which the Lord your God looks after, on which the Lord your God always keeps his eye, from the beginning to year's end. And again, it's this understanding that you're about to come into a land that's it's not irrigation, it's not done by man. It's not a work of farmers and agricultural revolution and using all those kinds of things. This is a land that if God loves you and takes care of you, it's God's garden. It's literally like you can pluck the food right off the mountains. And this is what it means by, again, it soaks up the rains from heaven. It's literally like God is going to take care of the land if you take care of what you're supposed to do. God looks after this land. So this is not, it does not like Egypt. It's not like Egypt, not a man-made thing. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin you, hayom, this day, loving the Lord your God and serving him with all your heart and soul, b'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, right there, b'chol levavchem, v'chol nafshechem, I will grant the rain for you, for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain, your wine and oil. It's a very famous phrase. And you will provide you grass in the fields for your cattle, and you shall eat your fill. And again, you will eat and be satisfied. Take care not to be allured away to serve other gods and bow to them. For the Lord's anger will flare up against you, and he will shut up the skies so that there'll be no rain, on the ground will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the good land that the Lord is assigning you. Therefore, impress these words upon your very heart. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Again, these phrases that we have from Ve'ahavta, from the prayer Shema Ve'ahavta. Almost again, the same words. And again, we use these words in the Shema Ve'ahavta prayer. It's paragraphs that are later paragraphs. They're not traditionally said out loud, but they're part of the Shema Ve'ahavta paragraphs. So if you look at Deuteronomy, where it says Deuteronomy chapter 11, it's these phrases, these verses. Teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home and when you lie down. Against almost the same words from Deuteronomy. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, to that end that you and your children may endure in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign them, as long as there is a heaven over the earth. So again, here it's not only do it, but do it so that you can long endure in the land. If then you faithfully keep all the instructions that I command you, loving the Lord, walking in his ways, holding fast to him, the Lord will dislodge all these nations you will dispossess, nations greater and more numerous than you. Every spot in which your foot treads shall be yours. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness to the Lebanon, and from the river, the Euphrates, to the western sea. And here you can see the lines of the borders, the boundaries of Israel go all the way from the Euphrates, all the way from the Lebanon, which is north, and further, much further east than Israel currently is bordered, goes all the way to the Mediterranean, all the way down to the wilderness in the south and the Negev. No man shall stand up to you, no man will be afraid of you. The Lord your God will put the dread and fear of you over the whole land which you are to set foot, as he promised you. And that's the way Aked ends, with, again, that repetition of, you will not have to worry about taking control of the land. You will not have to worry about how to do it. God will do it for you. So what's so special about this is that, again, God will do it for you if you follow the rules. God will water the land for you if you follow the rules. The land is yours, but it's precarious because, again, this is not like every other land. This is a land that we really require our fulfilling the covenant in order to stay in it. It's not just a matter of, you have a really nice land, a very powerful land. It's a land that it's conditional. It's a conditional relationship. It's really, really, it's a really powerful line. And we're now going to get into the book the next chapter, which is from the very end of chapter 11. And as we're going to go into chapter 12 now, we're going to read at least part of Re'eh today in this last 20 minutes or so. Again, this is the portion that I like to call my portion because it's my bar mitzvah portion. And it begins again with these words, Re'eh, Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, this day I set before you a blessing and a curse. The choice. And here, of course, it's not just laid out the way it was in the last portion, but here it says flat out, you have a blessing and curse. You have a choice. And I will tell you what's so special about this is that every day, Hayom is a choice. Every single day, we have that choice. We have choices before us. Blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I enjoin you upon this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day, and follow other gods whom you've not experienced. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. And so what's interesting about this is that there actually isn't just a blessing and curse that you theoretically think about. There actually are blessings and curses, which we're going to get to in a few weeks. In Kitavo, we actually have the blessings and curses that are supposed to be uttered. So in a few weeks, we're actually going to read it. So Deuteronomy sets up what we're supposed to do inside of it. So the blessings and curses are actually uttered. On one mountain, on Mount Gerizim, you utter the blessings, and on Mount Ebal, you utter the curse. Obviously, you don't want to be on Mount Ebal. Well, it's just uttering it. It's not like you're cursed at Mount Ebal, but you're uttered it. It's not like Mount Ebal was cursed because of it, but it's definitely not. It's not great to be on Mount Ebal if it's the place of where they got cursed. But Mount Gerizim to this very day is the holy mountain of the Samaritans. And there aren't many Samaritans left, but they do have their temple, their sacrificial center on Mount Gerizim, the Samaritans. That is their holy mountain. Both are on the other side of Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of Canaanites, who dwell in the Arava, near Gilgal, by the terebinths of Moab, which again, terebinth is a fancy word for an oasis, or not so much necessarily an oasis in that there's desert all around it, but it is a forest. It is a oak forest, which we have here in Southern California, areas where we have oak groves, whether we call them Thousand Oaks or we call them, Oak Grove or Oak Park. Oaks are a feature of the land of Israel. And again, in certain areas, you have what we call a terebinth, which is the fancy way of saying aloneh, which is the word for alonim or oaks, which is why Camp Alonim out in Simi Valley is called it, because it is a place where there are a lot of oak trees, and definitely have them in Southern California. You're about to cross the Jordan. So again, these mountains are not in the desert. They're in Israel. You're about to cross the Jordan and enter and possess the land that the Lord your God is assigning you. When you've occupied it and settled in it, take care to observe all the laws and the rules that I have set before you this day. Hayom, which again is the way there is a chapter break here. The Jewish folks did not do a chapter break here because for us, it makes a lot of sense to then go into take care of all the rules and laws I say before you say, and these are the rules. So what happens in chapter 12 is the actual laws. And so what happens here is that in the first 12 chapters of Deuteronomy, we get kind of like the buildup to the laws. And right here is where it really gets into the laws. Now, again, we do have laws, and people say, well, look, if you look at the last couple of chapters, you have the Shema Ve'ahavta right there, which says, you're supposed to bind them as a sign upon your arm, and between your eyes. Now, those are pretty important commandments. But what's interesting about this is that those actually seem to be maybe the 10 commandments. So when it says to bind them as a sign, are those maybe the 10 commandments that are supposed to be on them? What's in Tefillin, what are in Tefillin to this day, what are in Mezuzot are the Shema and Ve'ahavta. But it's interesting to think maybe it's supposed to be the laws, or at least the laws that are the ones that were given at Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments. So maybe originally Mezuzah had the 10 Commandments. Maybe originally those laws that we had in our head all the time were the 10 Commandments. But again, there definitely was an emphasis to try to move away from just thinking the 10 Commandments were the only laws. And of course, we know that because the book of Deuteronomy says, no, there are other laws. These are the laws that you must carefully observe in the land that Lord your God, the Lord God of your fathers is giving you to possess as long as you live on earth. And here are the laws. And again, really it is, it says, take care to observe the laws. These are the laws. And now we get into the actual laws. And here we get into the mitzvot. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to dispossess worship their gods, whether on lofty mountains or on hills or under any luxuriant trees. These were all places where the Canaanites would make their altars. And what you do is you destroy them. You destroy the places, you destroy their temples, you destroy their places where they would worship. So again, these were all places where you would find that these cultic sites, you knock them down. You tear down their altars, you smash their pillars, you put their sacred posts to the fire, you cut down the images of their gods, obliterating their name from that site. You don't even call them those site anymore. Yeah, Joyce.
Did they do child sacrifices there?
Mhm.
Did they sacrifice?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
they did child sacrifice there. They did sexual acts there. They did
Okay.
all manners of kind of strange things that we, again, can only kind of imagine because of the way that the Bible describes it. And we found archaeological evidence for some of these sites. So we know that some of them were not really fully destroyed, or if they were destroyed, they weren't completely obliterated. But again, it actually says you don't even call them by their name anymore. You take that name and you don't call them those sites anymore.
Thank you.
And what's important here is that also, and again, this is real important, as kind of Joyce is alluding to, don't worship God in the same manner. So even when you take down those places, you don't go, oh, you know what? I have a great idea. We're going to do God in the same way that those Canaanites did. We're going to do it now to Adonai. We're going to offer child sacrifice, or we're going to do these sexual rites to God. No. You're not just going to replace God for their gods. You're going to behave in a different way. You're not going to worship God in the same manner. Look only to the site that the Lord your God will choose amidst your tribes as habitation to establish his name there. There you are to go. And there you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes, your contributions, your votive and free will offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks. Together with your households, you shall feast there before the Lord your God, happy in all the undertakings in which the Lord your God has blessed you. So here's what it says. You don't even offer sacrifices anywhere except for Jerusalem. And this, what's so interesting about this is that we have this move in at least the book of Deuteronomy of maybe one of the reasons why by the time of Deuteronomy, people said people should really only worship in Jerusalem was because not having one cultic place to worship made it easier for people to just kind of invent their own rituals and do those kind of Canaanite or pseudo-Canaanite rituals, which they're not supposed to do. And so by the time of Deuteronomy, they kind of gave away the hint right here, which is that they were just substituting God. They were just like putting God's name in, and we're still doing the same things. And so we have to make sure that they do it the right way. And again, it kind of makes sense. Because again, it says, you shall not act you shall not act at all as we now act here, every man as he pleases, because you have not yet come to the allotted haven that the Lord your God has given you. So again, the way you're doing things now, even in the wilderness, isn't the way things are supposed to be. Even with the Mishkan, even with the tabernacle, there's this kind of sense, and maybe again, it's also an explanation for why by the time of the book of Deuteronomy, we're not talking about in the wilderness, but we're talking about the last 300 or 400 years since we've been in the land where we've been doing things everywhere we want and any way we want. No, now let's make sure we only do it in Jerusalem, which makes sense if the book of Deuteronomy was written by priests or by people who are trying to make sure that only what goes on in Jerusalem. It doesn't say Jerusalem. It won't say Jerusalem. It won't make that anachronistic statement of it'll be Jerusalem. Doesn't say that. It says where God will tell you to.
Mm-hmm.
When you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that your God is allotting you, and he grants you safety from all enemies around you, and you live in security, Then you must bring everything that I command to the site where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name, your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and your contributions, and all the choice votive offerings that you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God with your sons and your daughters, with your male and female slaves, along with the Levite in your settlements, for he has no territorial allotment with you. And again, this is this reminder of, again, taking care of the Levite, which is a common refrain that we're going to have in the rest of the book of Deuteronomy. Don't forget the Levite. The Levite is like your children. It is like the orphan. It is like the widow who doesn't have their own stuff. So you have to take care of them, which again really kind of shows us what they're trying to tell us about the Levites, which is if they're not offering sacrifices anymore in their own communities, which is what the Levites probably did for the past 400 years, the Levites were the ones in charge. If you're making everybody worship in Jerusalem, you better come up with a solution for taking care of the Levites, which is that you have to take care of the Levites. If they're not offering sacrifices anymore, then you have to take care of them. You have to give them food, because you can't have a bunch of unemployed Levites living amongst you. It'll be very unfair for them. So take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place you like, but only in the place the Lord your God will choose in one of your tribal territories. There you shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, and there you shall observe all that I enjoin upon you. So again, this is kind of the commandments which are going to establish that Jerusalem is the place. Now, here's an important idea. Wherever you do this in Jerusalem, it doesn't mean that you can't eat meat. Whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements according to the blessing the Lord your God has granted you. The unclean and the clean alike may partake of it, as of the gazelle and the deer, but you must not partake of the blood. You shall pour it out on the ground like water. Now, we are going to get in a couple of verses, not too far away, the animals that you can eat. And you can make the argument that the reason why we have this is because it just told us that you can kill animals. You're just not going to eat their blood, and they're not sacrifices anymore. These are not animals that you're setting aside something for sacrifice, which is basically telling us in a roundabout way, that's what they used to do. They would take their animals, they would sacrifice them, they'd give some of the meat to the Levites, and then they would eat it. And the Levites were sustained in each one of the settlements by that. But if you're not going to have a Levite then taking some of that and sacrificing it to God, then you wouldn't by nature be giving the Levites any food. But you must still give Levites food. You're going to see it repeated over and over and over again. Even though you're not sacrificing, you're giving the Levites food. But again, you're not supposed to have the blood. We already know that. You may not partake in your settlements of the tithes of your new grain or wine or oil or firstlings of your herds or flocks or any of their votive offerings that you vow, or your freewill offerings or of your contributions. These you must consume before the Lord your God in the place the Lord your God will choose. You and your sons and your daughters, your male and female slaves, and the Levite in your midst, in your settlement, happy before the Lord your God in all of your undertakings. So when it comes to your offerings, you got to go to Jerusalem with them. And you take care of the Levites who are now not going to be eating them in your community. You got to make sure that you give them that either in Jerusalem or again, wherever you are, you take care of the Levites. Be sure not to neglect the Levite as long as you live in your land. The Levites, they're not going to eat in your settlements anymore as sacrifices, so you better take care of them. So again, there's a reason for this. I mean, you have to consider the whole story. And here it goes. When the Lord enlarges your territory as he promised you, and you say, I shall eat some meat, for you have the urge to eat meat, you may eat meat wherever you wish. If the place where the Lord has chosen to establish his name is too far from you, you may slaughter the cattle or the sheep the Lord gives you as I have instructed you. You may eat at your heart's content in your settlements. Eat it, however, as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. The unclean may eat it together with the clean. Again, be sure to do not partake of the blood, for the blood is the life. You must not consume the life of the flesh. You must not partake of it. You must pour it on the ground like water. And again, the Canaanites drank the blood. In many of their rituals, they drank blood. Judaism said, no, you can't do that. You can't drink the blood, and you can't just say, well, I'm drinking it for God. You don't drink the blood. It's life. You must not partake of it in order that things may go well with you and your descendants, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. But with such sacred and votive donations as you may have, shall be taken by you to the site the Lord will choose. You shall offer your burnt offerings, both the flesh and the blood, on the altar of the Lord your God. And of your other sacrifices, the blood shall be poured out on the altar of the Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh. Be careful to heed all these commandments that I enjoin upon you, that it may go well with you and your descendants after you forever. For you will be doing what is good and right in the sight of the Lord your God. When the Lord your God has cut down before you the nations that you are about to enter and dispossess, and you have dispossessed them and settled in their land, beware of being lured into the ways after they have been wiped out before you. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did those nations worship their gods? I too will follow those practices. So even after they're gone, you might want to say, what did they used to do? What did these people used to do? You might be curious. Well, don't take it the next step. Don't do what they did. For you shall not act thus towards the Lord your God, for they perform for their gods every abhorrent act the Lord detests. And here is what Joyce said. They even offer up their sons and daughters in fire to their gods. So that is the line that flat out says, think about what they do. Because if you think, well, it's kind of fun to do what they used to do, think about where it led. What did it lead to? And it led to the sacrifice of their sons and daughters. So look, this is what is the fear of people who go back and start to open up to some of the pagan rituals that people did as part of Wicca or magic or these kinds of things. People worry that if we open up that back up to some people say, no, I just want to practice the cultural traditions of our pagan ancestors. The problem is that that's where it leads to. It can lead to it. And again, we have laws that protect us. But if the laws of, let's say, religious practice of, let's say, First Amendment rights were applied to this, then where does it end? Because at what point will somebody say, well, I'm just practicing my First Amendment religious right of doing these things? And people were saying, but it goes against all of our values. Well, which value you're going to say? Is it the ability to practice my religion the way I want? And so this is the problem. This is where, again, this can happen. This isn't theoretical. This has happened. It happened during the Israelite experience. We know that they did it because the Bible says later on that they were offering up, Israelite kings were offering up their sons to the gods, to Canaanite gods. So now we get into some specific laws, not just the general, don't offer up your kids to the gods, don't worship like they did, don't do those kind of things. We're going to get to some specific laws. And this one we already kind of heard already too. Be careful to observe only which I enjoin you upon you, neither add nor take away from it. So we heard that in Va'er Hanan a couple of weeks ago. And here, if there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner, and he gives you a sign or portent, saying, let us follow and worship another God, whom you have not experienced, even if the sign or portent that he named to you comes true, do not heed the words of the prophet or that dream diviner. For the Lord your God is testing you to see you whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. So if a guy says that something, there's going to be an eclipse, and that's a sign that we're supposed to worship Baal, you don't do it even if there's an eclipse, because God is going to test you, and it'll happen. People will be right. They could be right 50% of the time, right? It's not a reason to do it, because again, what the rules are. The rules are here, and we don't look for miracles to get us to do things. The rules are there so that it doesn't happen. And folks, this was the argument against Christianity, because even if people said, well, yeah, people are doing miracles in Jesus's name, they said, but we're not supposed to the Bible says you're not supposed to, even if a person does stuff, you're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to worship somebody else. So if somebody says, well, now I worship Jesus, and this person said, but you can't worship another God. It says so. Even if he did heal somebody, even if he did bring back somebody to life. And these are the arguments that were happening at the time of Jesus. These were the arguments that Jesus' own followers were dealing with within the Israelite, the nation of Israel at that time, the kingdom of Judah or Judea. They were dealing with people saying, okay, fine. So he did do those miracles, or there are people that are doing miracles in his name, but you can't follow another God. And it says God tests us with these kinds of, oh, but wait, didn't you hear what this guy can do? Again, this was according to the Bible, it happened well before Jesus, but it definitely happened during Jesus's time. And it was something that early Christians and the Jews who they lived with or who were their family members said, I don't care. I don't care if he brought someone back from the dead. I don't care if Paul, you just worked a miracle in Jesus's name. You're not supposed to worship another God. The Torah says in Deuteronomy, this could happen, and we don't do it. And it was kind of the end of the discussion for a lot of people. It was right there because the Torah says it's going to happen. Follow none but the Lord your God and revere none but him. Observe his commandments alone and heed only his orders. Worship none but him and hold fast to him. As for that prophet or dream diviner, you shall be put to death, for he urges disloyalty to the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the path of the Lord your God, who commanded you to this day. You will sweep out evil from your midst. So he is supposed to be put to death, which again begs the question, was Jesus put to death for doing this? It's hard to say. What we know from the Christian Bible is that the Romans did it. And if the Romans did it, the Romans didn't execute him for breaking Jewish law because the Romans cared nothing for Jewish law and would not have executed Jesus for a Jewish reason. That we know for sure. And it doesn't seem like the Christian Bible even says that's what happened. They killed him for being the king of the Jews or for claiming to be king of the Jews. If that's what indeed happened. That's what the Christian Bible says happened. Taking the Christian Bible at its word. But the issue of could Jesus have been executed for what he said? It is possible that he could have been, but he, again, if he told people not to worship God, which we don't know that he did, but if he did, it says that those kinds of people, if they're telling people not to worship God, then they are supposed to be destroyed. It says so. So you can kill those people, or I should say you're supposed to kill them if they're urging disloyalty to God. All I can tell you. Did it happen? Of course it happened. It happened by the time this was written. It happened during the time of Jesus by other prophets, because the Christian Bible says there were other prophets that were doing miracles at the time of Jesus, who Jesus had to kind of like do better than, or again, his followers had to say, yeah, but Jesus isn't that guy. Jesus is a different guy. He's not that guy who's doing miracles. He's a different guy who did miracles. So we know what happened. And we know that it was a big deal. And it was a big deal 2,000 years ago, which was 1,000 years after Moses. So again, this is a big, big issue to some extent that had to be answered by early Christians. Has it been answered 2,000 years later? I don't know. I don't have that argument with my Christian brethren. And I have a lot of pastors who I'm friends with, and we have an agreement with them. And I agree with almost everything that they say. I will tell you, if the issue is, did Jesus break the law by asking people to pray to him? I have a different reading maybe than they are. I'm not going to have that argument with them anyways, because I'm not sure that Jesus actually told anyone to worship him. I'm not sure that that's what happened.
Did he say he was the Son of God?
That's the problem, is that the Christian Bible has different layers to it, and we're not sure what Jesus actually said. There are arguments about it. There are seminars which are given and have been written up over what Jesus really said. It's difficult to know. And so the problem is that we don't even know, and I'm not sure that that's what happened. But do people offer up prayers in the name of Jesus? Yes. If they're saying a prayer in the name of Jesus, are they actually now not saying the prayer in the name of God? I don't know. I mean, I do know. I think it's fairly obvious. Does that make the person bad? No, because you could also read it as saying, well, and again, some rabbis have been doing this for a long time. Well, it's a transition. People are transitioning through these prayers into recognizing God. So if they invoke Jesus, but they're really, really invoking God, then it's a transitory step. I will tell you that, I have a lot of friends who are Christian, a lot of friends who are Christian clergy. So we obviously have a friendship, and we have an understanding, and I have an understanding, or my view of them is one of respect, and one that I have an ability to understand it in a way that makes me comfortable. Does everybody feel that way? No. Does every Orthodox Jew feel comfortable with it? No. Does every Reformed Jew feel comfortable with it? No. Are there Reformed Jews who feel comfortable with Christians? Yes. Are there Orthodox Christians who feel comfortable with Christians? Yes. So there's people on all sides of this, and I believe it's not even an observant issue, because again, there are some Orthodox Jews who are very friendly with evangelical Christians, and there's some Orthodox Jews who will not step foot in a Christian church. So
Right.
there are some Reformed Jews who will not step forward in a Christian church, and there are some Reformed Jews who will engage in dialogue with Christians. So you can't say it's even a religious or observance issue. It's a gut feeling that people have, which is based on experiences. It's based on their understandings. It's based on personal reactions, which sometimes have a lot less to do with the thought process and more to do with just a gut reaction or experiences that people had as a kid. If they were beaten up by a Christian, maybe they have a feeling about Christianity that has been informed by their anti-Semitic experiences that were based on, unfortunately, religious hatred. There are reasons that I can't even explain. So I can only tell you there's not a uniformity on how people have read this. It is a very important law within Judaism. Obviously, it's an ongoing issue within Judaism, because as long as there are other religions that have invoked other people's names for prayers and not just God's, it's not just Adonai's, it's an issue. But it'll probably always, as long as there's a Christianity, it's going to be somewhat of an issue for people to understand and to come to terms with. And hopefully we can do it in a understanding and mutually respectful way, I hope. So this is what we're in right now. If your brother or your own mother's son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your closest friend entices you in secret, saying, "Come, let us worship other gods, whom neither you nor your fathers have experienced, from among gods of the peoples around you, either near to you or distant, anywhere from one end of the earth to the other. Do not give assent or give heed to him. Show him no pity or compassion, and do not shield him, but take his life. Let your hand be be the first fist against him, and put him to death, and the hand of the rest of the people after." So it says, if this happens even in your own family, you better be the first one to root it out. Stone him to death, for he has sought to make you stray from the Lord your God, who brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of bondage. Thus all Israel will hear and be afraid, and such evil things will not be done again in your midst. So you got to make an example of him even in your own house. It's pretty wild. It's pretty, again, we do not understand, or most people do not understand this to be the religions that we come into contact with today. For the most part, would it include Hinduism or other forms of polytheism? I don't know. If people told you, well, we got to start worshiping these gods, would you have to kill the person? I don't know. I would say it's a pretty strict understanding of it. It's a pretty scary reading, but for the most part, we're not confronted with child sacrifice anymore. And I'll say it that, and that's not an out, but I will tell you, we're not dealing with the kinds of religious experiences that they were. We're going to finish up in just a second. If you heard it said in one of the towns that the Lord your God has given you to dwell in, that some scoundrels from among you have gone and subverted the inhabitants of their town, saying, "Come, let us worship other gods whom you've not experienced," you shall investigate and inquire and interrogate thoroughly. If it is true, the fact is established, that abhorrent thing was perpetrated in your midst, put the inhabitants of that town to the sword, and put its cattle to the sword. Doom it in all and all that is in therein, into destruction. Gather all its spoil and go into the open square and burn down the town and all its spoil as a holocaust to the Lord your God. And again, I don't love the word holocaust being used, but that is a burning up by fire. That is what a holocaust is, which with a lowercase h. I would say a complete destruction of their stuff, and it shall remain an everlasting ruin, never to be rebuilt. Let nothing nothing that has been doomed stick to your hand, in order that the Lord your God may turn his blazing anger and show you compassion, right? And his compassion increase as he promised your fathers on oath. For you will be heeding the Lord your God, obeying all his commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, doing what is right in the sight of the Lord your God. So again, don't keep anything from those cities that they're worshiping and they go off and worship other gods. Let that stuff be destroyed. Now, I will tell you that this is the part of the Torah where this is actually where we're going to finish up here. We're going to start next week on chapter 14, and we will be reading part of this chapter, part of these chapters for, we'll still be catching up, 14, 15, and again, when we get into 16, we're finishing up with Re'eh. You can see it's a fairly long portion. But one of the things it has is the holidays, the stuff that we were supposed to do on the holidays, but it also has, as you see, it has a list of in chapter 14. What we did not get to is a list of the animals that are kosher, and so chapter 14 includes this, and this is the part that I actually read from my bar mitzvah. I read this from here, Bani Matem Adonai. Bani Matem Adonai Elohechem lo titkeredu v'lo tasimu korcha benanechem lamed. I'm not even reading it very good. Ki am kadosh atahu Adonai. Okay, so I will tell you that I do love this line, and we'll finish on a kind of a happier note. For you are a people consecrated, you're holy. I don't even like the word consecrated. You're Am Kadosh. You're a holy people to the Lord. The Lord your God chose you from among all the peoples on the earth to be his treasured people. That you're an Am Segula. You're a treasured nation. And again, it doesn't mean you're better than everybody else, but you're God's treasure. And I guess it means there's something special about you. But again, this is a hefty responsibility that comes with it. But it's a beautiful line. You're Am Kadosh, you're holy people, and you're a people that is going to be a treasure to God. So, and of course, then it gets into not eating anything that's abhorrent. So we'll get into that next week. And we'll be reading those chapters 14, 15, and 16. And then we'll be getting into Shoftim. We will read, I promise you, we will definitely get into Shoftim next week. And Shoftim's a little bit shorter, but Shoftim deals with justice. And it has, of course, the line, Tzedek, Tzedek, Terdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. So we will definitely get into Shoftim and maybe even finish it because we're starting to catch up. But we definitely want to pay attention to everything along the way. And again, we're going to be reading about these laws, the laws of Kashrut next week. We'll be reading about the laws of the holidays. Not the holidays you're thinking of like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the holidays of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and how important those were to our ancestors, as you already know, as we read in Leviticus. So read about it in Leviticus, we read about it in Numbers, and we read about it again here in Deuteronomy. So we'll be reading that next week. So again, everybody, please stay healthy, please stay safe, please stay connected. I'm adding that to all of my things about not just being healthy and safe and of good courage, but also, again, please stay connected, and please don't be alone, and be a part of our community, be a part of a community, be a part of your family and friends, and please use this time that, again, we're still dealing with a lot of chaos and a lot of unknown. Please, one thing we know is that we need to have other people and we need to be connected. So please make sure you do that. And thank you, everybody, for being connected tonight with us. And we'll see you all, I think, hopefully, God willing, next week. And by the way, we're supposed to have services in the synagogue again, not this Friday, but next Friday, we're supposed to be in synagogue. And I have some very special songs for my friend Joe Buchanan from Texas. I'm going to be sharing those this week. I have 2 new songs from my friend Joe, who's going to be doing some great music for Shabbat with us online, and he will be coming. Joe will be coming before the end of the year. He'll be visiting us at Temple Beth Ami. We're working on a date after the high holidays for him to come out in person from Texas and sing some songs. I love to say from Texas because if you've seen Joe Buchanan before, there's no question where he is from. He is 100%. He's 100% a great Jewish musician, but he's also 100% from Texas. So everybody take care. Greetings to Texas, from Texas, all around Texas, to Missouri, and to all parts in between. Please, again, stay good, everybody. Thank you.
Bless you and thank
Thanks very
you.
much.
Thank you, everybody. And I'll be heading on a plane later on. I'll be on my way to New York and Boston. So I'm on my way this weekend to see my daughter. So we'll see you all, hopefully.
Have a wonderful trip.
Hey, thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. Love you.
Love you back.
Bye.